All right, Jake. Welcome in. So, for those who don't know, Jake is a friend of Drew, a avid listener to the Two Dads No Supervision podcast, and in the spirit of having open dialogue and conversation, he wanted to have a conversation, debate around immigration. So that's why we're here today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. A little nervous, never done anything like this before, for the whole world to see. But it's
12
yeah,
people.
yeah, a little nervous, a little excited, but yeah, I mean, we can kind of just we can get rolling whenever you
Yeah,
like.
definitely. So I guess you thought that we would have some different views on immigration. So I guess kind of state what your view of immigration is, and um, I I guess yeah, we'll start there.
Um, well, I think we both can agree that um we I personally would love for um, legal immigration to occur on a, I don't want to say, I don't want it, I don't want uh, there to be an easier access necessarily. I think easier is kind of the wrong term, but I do think that there needs to be some sort of uh, legal immigration reform. Um, I think that the way that we go about it right now as a country is flawed. Um, and I think mainly the biggest thing for me is we were, when we were flooded and we had no clue who was coming into the country. And this goes back years. Uh, this is before Biden. This was before Trump. It- it was, I think it was accelerated under Biden, but uh, I do think that there has to be some sort of reform, and maybe we can start the conversation there. Uh, but as far as my stance is, it sucks because I don't think that there, I think there are definitely genuine people here who are illegal, who are trying to do the best for their family and for their kids. I mean, who wouldn't want to have a better life for their family and their kids? But I think that they just went about it the wrong way. And as a result, I mean, we have to kind of we have to kind of divorce ourselves from our feelings, and as a nation, we just, a lot of them have to be deported back. And that I think before I just start rambling on, um, I think that we uh, we just have to. I don't want to sound too harsh, but I think that we have to start by just the self deportations that are occurring, and we have to just we do have to have the raids and the sorry, I'm having issues collecting my thoughts here.
Yeah,
Um,
no worries. I understand that perspective of when it feels like we've reached a point where we can't get control over it. We have to use extreme measures so that we can get control over it. I think that's what you're kind of alluding to is, we've reached the point where so many people have come in who we don't know who they are, that in order for us to get to a point where we can have any sort of legislation, we have to figure out who these people are first. Um, is that a good summary?
yeah, yeah, that's a good summary. I think I just kind of I got a little. I got a little off track and lost my train of thought. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's pretty much what I'm trying to get at is
Yeah.
that we have to. I feel like I feel like the levees have already burst, and we have to get control. And some people don't like how uh, the Trump administration is going about it. Um, I don't see another way that we can go about it other than mass deportations. And maybe I can get a little clarity on like what you guys on the left uh, think would be a better solution to that.
Yeah, I would actually point to um, probably the most successful or the most revered conservative Republican of uh, at least that I could remember, and Ronald Reagan, right? And Ronald Reagan granted amnesty to 3 million undocumented people. I think that if you go through and you actually provide amnesty for people who, as as you said, there's quite a bit of people here who have good intentions, right? They are
Yeah,
hardworking. They are members of important communities, right? They pay bills. They work hard. They contribute to the local economy. They rent things, right? So that means like the landlords are depending on them as well. If they agree to background checks, um, then give them amnesty. That would be my solution. The reason why that is my solution is they are guilty of a civil penalty. So being in the country without proper documentation is not a felony. It is not a misdemeanor. It is a civil penalty, right? So when the right says, well, these are all criminals, if we use that level of intention when we talk about criminality, we're criminals too, right? I would assume, Jake, that you've driven over the speed limit before, correct?
yeah, I've got the tickets to prove it. Uh,
Right, right. So um, now, if they went through if they purposely did not go through a port of entry, that is a misdemeanor. And you may divide things up that way, right? You may say, hey, people who came over here, um, whether it's on a visa or they came over here and they went through a port of entry and they claimed asylum, right? Um, Maybe you grant amnesty to those people who will go through a background check, right? Maybe the people who didn't go through those means and did commit a misdemeanor, maybe you have a different solution for them. But I would imagine that you would think it would be pretty ridiculous if we just started locking up everybody who goes uh, 15 miles over the speed limit, and then we put them in a detention center for indefinitely until their case is heard, right? Um, that's that's where I'm at. I know that you're going to find far leftists who say, well, we don't need borders. We don't need like that's not where I come from. I don't think that's where a large majority of the pragmatic Democrats come from. Um, I think a large majority of the pragmatic Democrats are much more in line with the Obama administration. Of we're going to deport a lot of people who come over illegally because we need to secure our borders, but we should have a quicker pathway to citizenship, right? Because people who want to be here, people who want to contribute to our society, um, they should. It ends up benefiting everybody when they come over. The issue is if you don't know who's coming over, then you lose that sense of security.
Right. One thing about the amnesty that, you know, from what I've gathered from either people that I listen to or, uh, you know, any research that I've done is that um, if we were to just grant mass amnesty, that um, it would put a it would put a halt on deportations as a whole. Um, and the reason why is because if we were to say, for instance, that, okay, anybody that has come through the borders from this point, like say anybody that's come that if you came through illegally, like in, you know, 2020, anybody from 2020 to now, uh, you're not getting amnesty, but we give all the other illegal immigrants amnesty prior to then. Uh, you know, it creates a loophole to where, you know, because we don't have documentation on these people and we don't know who they are because we suck at keeping records, you know, all these people have to do is say, no, 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 I've been here for such and such amount of time. I've been here since 2019, 2020, yada, yada, yada. Uh, and these people are going to get amnesty even if they've been here for, you know, a year, 2 years. And I think it just kind of depends on how many people are we planning on giving amnesty to, because if the numbers are even half right, say you've got, you know, 7 million, 8 million illegal immigrants that are here now, you know, do we give all, I know that your stance isn't we don't need to give all of them amnesty because we don't know who they are. They could be criminals that have a criminal past from where they came from, but also, like, do we give all 8 million of these immigrants, do we give them amnesty because they just say, hey, we have we've been here since 2020, we've been here for 5 years, you know, we need amnesty, we've contributed to the economy for this long, which we can get into about that later because I have some thoughts about that. But, you know, why does that make sense? Like, see
Yeah,
how it kind of creates a loophole for
no,
that?
well, I don't think it's a loophole. I think what you said makes sense. Anybody who you offer amnesty to everybody who goes through the means of verification and background checks can get amnesty. And I don't think that there should be like a time frame on which we give the amnesty to. And anyone who does not go through those proceedings, whether they have a criminal record or not, you can end up deporting because you said, you know, we gave you this chance to verify who you are, to you know, run a background check, and to have expedited, um, you know, temporary legal status in the United States, and you chose not to do that. So then then you get to deport them. Um, yeah, I, I I think that is the best thing to do. Just
Would
because,
that not
yeah.
create, I'm sorry to cut you off, but would that not create, like, you know, I guess my thoughts on that would be, you know, to go through the process of doing background checks and to go through the process of doing all these things, it takes time. And
Mhm.
in order for uh, you know, the way that I'm viewing it from a Republican side is we're going to be spending uh, more assets. I don't know necessarily about more money, but more time and effort in trying to figure out who we should give amnesty to when we really should just be focusing more on, hey, sorry, you came here the wrong way. We're going to send you back. You want to come back, go through the legal way, uh, and we can start the process then. I think that's kind of why I support what they're doing with this app, where they're sending, there's, you know, we can we could argue how much validity there is to it, but you know, they're reporting that there's been almost, or not almost, but over 1 million of self deportations happening, where we're just sending them back home and we're giving them $1,000, and you know, $1,000 might not seem like a lot of money, but you know, those people will be coming back to the United States at some point to try to get citizenship. I would assume, and they're just trying to. I would assume that those people are just trying to not get in trouble and not get deported by uh, by the administration. Uh, they're just trying to you know not get in as much trouble as possible. And that way they can get back to
Yes, the issue that I have with that, one, when you deport all of these people, you're going to create an economic strain. You're going to create an economic strain in these communities, as we talked about before, just the revenue that they provide in the communities, the landlords that are relying on the rent from these people, the car payments that they're making. So you're going to put a lot of strain on a lot of communities. And we know that immigration isn't going to end up being like a one for one thing, right? So if one person leaves Bismarck, North Dakota, another immigrant isn't just going to go to Bismarck, North Dakota, right? So you're going to um, unproportionately affect a lot of communities that are relying on the revenue, the work, and kind of the services that these immigrants provide. The other thing is, one, it, if we want to talk about the financial restraints or the financial concerns on providing amnesty, right? The big beautiful bill just made ICE um, the the most costly law enforcement agency in the United States. Um, you're also asking, I think it's what, 53 million people to provide work requirements every month for Medicaid, right? Um, so if you can have 53 million people provide work requirements every month for Medicaid, um, but not have an app that just has them fill out, background checks and just pertinent information so that they can get temporary status. I I don't really think the financial concerns are a legitimate argument, to be honest, because that actually sounds like a much more cost-effective way to do things than to do what um, the Trump administration is doing.
um, regarding like the uh, the workforce stuff. Um, I I don't think that the I don't think that it would cause a huge constraint on you know, on workforce if we were to start deporting, not just start deporting, workers or whatever. And you know, as far as like, one of the biggest things I hear is that uh, the farm labor this or farm labor that, and who's gonna pick our crops and stuff. And you know, from what I've gathered, research that I've done is that only 1% of the entire American labor force is employed in agriculture, and you know that's not a lot of people. And then when you're gonna uh, include the illegal immigrants, they if they make up a a significant share of those workers, it's still such a small sector that if we were to get rid of all of their all of those farm workers, is it is it really going to cause that much of a constraint if we were to do that, even though it only makes up 1% of our labor force?
The issue is that immigration, labor in general, greatly affects and greatly boosts our economy, our local economy and our national economy. And it ends up raising wages for natives, and it creates new opportunities for natives. The reason why this is because it just brings in more revenue. So you could think of, if you look at Drew's business of the power washing business. Right now, Drew has to be the salesperson, he has to be the owner, he has to be the person who goes out and cleans the houses, and does the pressure washing. And it's just not affordable for him to get someone out there to actually do the power washing. Now, the argument that you usually hear is that, well, what will happen is an immigrant will come, they will say, I will work for a lower wage, and then the person who Drew would have hired no longer gets that job, and that the wages for that job has decreased. What actually happens is Drew is able to get someone in faster, and he's able to, now I'm selling, this person is going out and cleaning, I'm now making more money coming in. So I can hire a couple more pressure washers to come through, whether that's immigrants or natives, right? And now I need a manager to manage the people who are doing the pressure washing in specific areas and everything else. You're typically not going to have the project manager be an immigrant because you want the face of things to be someone who can speak the language of your people, right? So now that
Yeah.
person that he would have hired as just a pressure washer, he's hiring as a project manager, and they're making more money. Not only are they making more money, but now that is five extra people in the community that are spending money and bringing revenue to other businesses, right? This is why when you look at nearly all the studies, um, from an economic standpoint, immigrants are one of the best things that we can do to boost our economy. One, because mostly when people come over to the United States, they're not coming over as in school age, right? So we didn't have to spend all of that money for 18 years to put them through the school system, right? They're just coming in and they're just being productive members, and bringing in revenue and paying taxes and everything else. Um, and then it allows those businesses to end up growing. Um, so when you take that workforce away, so if Drew has three power washers that he's using, and those power washers are gone, well, now he has to look at the project manager and he has to say, "Hey, I don't need you anymore. I don't have enough power washers um, to justify me having a project manager, so I'm going to have to let you go." And then Drew can't go out there and get more salespeople, so now he has to be the only salesperson, right? So now it goes back down to he's getting less business in because there's only so many hours that he can promote his business while also running his business. And it has a huge net negative effect on the economy.
But wouldn't you want to hire American workers though?
You end up do
I mean,
hiring American workers.
not if they're, but if they're illegal immigrants, they're not American workers.
No, but you end up hiring them because you're growing your company, right? So I can hire project managers, I can hire salespeople, I can hire more people because I have money coming in. Again, like labor isn't like a fixed asset. It is elastic, just like capital is, right? The more capital that you can play with, the more things you can end up doing, and the more that you can grow. It's the same thing with labor. Now, if you give these people amnesty, right? That's great, because then Drew can know for sure, hey, like the people that I hire, they've gone through their background checks. They're not going to end up, you know, being a security risk or harming any of my customers. That's amazing. They're still going to work really hard, and I still get to grow that business. And now I'm able to hire more Americans, and then that is what ends up happening with just workforce in general. Um,
I'd argue that he should just save himself a headache and hire an American worker who can do a background check immediately, though.
sure,
That
but
way he doesn't have to worry about it. And, you know, as far as like, illegal immigrants, as far as that, I understand what you're saying, they're going to contribute by spending money and this and that. But as far as the, as far as like, and I understand that that they do have, you know, that they do add to our nation's GDP. Uh, Most of that's not in any type of tax contributions or anything like that. It's mainly just in wages. And I get what you're saying as far as, well, that money that's being spent on businesses and stuff like that. But if if we are, I feel like that that labor could could still easily be uh, taken care of with American workers, and
I mean,
Americans
yeah,
and
if
Americans can make more money because if I understand you correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said that that Drew in this example could pay the immigrants less money. Um, yeah, I get that, but at the same time, like that I think that's kind of wrong. I would much rather, in my head, in my head, I would much rather pay somebody what their quote unquote fair share. You got me sounding like a socialist over here. The fair share of, you know, what they actually deserve to be paid, uh, and just skip over the illegal immigrant. If they are a United States citizen, if they're an immigrant, yeah, work them. But if they're illegal, I I just I don't understand why that would be better as a whole for the economy rather than hiring an American worker who is actually going to contribute not just with their wages, but with their tax contributions for the local and state and the federal government. That
right,
makes
yeah.
more
So
sense to me.
that's that's why you would amnesty them, right? Because
No,
they're
that's not.
already working.
I need to push back on that though, because amnesty, I don't think amnesty is that's not the solution. The solution would be just to hire American workers.
Well,
And
so
yes, if you
the
go ahead.
issue with that, and that would be a great point if we had like an 8% unemployment rate, right? We have record low unemployment rates. We actually have more job openings than we do employees, or people who are looking for jobs. Um, and when we talk about pressure washers, we're not talking about like high skilled, like great, jobs that are competitive, right? We're not talking about like software engineer or like anything else where like it's a very competitive field. We're talking about like I need someone to come out there and work. And as a business owner, you're you intuitively are trying to find someone who is going to produce the most amount for you and accept the least amount of pay, right? And as a worker, you're looking to do the least amount possible and get the most amount of pay, right? That's where the tension between higher like the hiring class and the labor class go, right? Like that's where negotiations come into play. Um, but if I can have someone who I know is a very hard worker, who is going to accept $10 an hour, they said, hey, I'll do it for $10 an hour, as opposed to someone who says, look, no, I need at least $15 an hour for me to do this. You're going to go for the $10 an hour as a business owner. Um, like that's just how business works, right? But again, we have record low unemployment right now. So yes, if we were at a point where we had 8 or 10% unemployment, then yes, like you can't have people come in and taking jobs for the vast majority of people who can't get work. But that's just not the situation that we find ourselves in.
Um, well, as far as the unemployment rate goes, that I think, and I think both sides use the unemployment rate unfairly, uh, because up until recently, I know that I did. Um, but I think the unemployment rate is flawed, because it only accounts for people that are actually looking for work. I think a better understanding of it would be to look at the what's what's that called? I think it's the labor force. Uh,
Labor participation rate.
yes, that's right.
Yeah, so
Um,
that's the other great thing about that is we have one of the highest participation rates that we've seen in the last like 60 years, um, for um, prime aged adults. Um, so not only do we have like one of the highest participation rates, we also have like the lowest unemployment rate, right? Um, and that's just kind of where we are.
um, I've got it in my notes. I'm sorry, I'm just skimming through it real quick.
Yeah.
Um, the from what I uh, from the research that I've done, and you and I can send you some stuff. I'd love to send links to share back and forth. That way we can both get some literature as well with this.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
but from what I've seen and stuff that I've gathered is uh, from my notes there's prime age men. We if we exclude the young and those who have retired early and focus on only prime age men 25 to 54 who are traditionally the most likely to work, there's still a significant deterioration for those without a bachelor's degree. Uh, and according to this study, uh, in 1960, the labor force, the percent that were not in the labor force were 4.2%. In 2000, it was 10.6, 15.2 in 2024. U.S. born women with no more than a high school diploma they fared better than men, uh, as far as not having a high school diploma and being in the labor field. Um, though the share of women not in the labor force rate is still higher in 2024 than in 2000 when female participation peaked. Uh, let's see.
Yeah, so
Uh,
if you look here, I've got the labor force participation rate for 25 to 54-year-olds, and we are like right off of a peak here. So yeah, it was a tad bit higher in 1999, like 84%, as opposed to about 83.3%. But again, we have one of the lowest unemployment rates as well. Um, so this notion that like we just don't have people working, um, like they've just dropped out of the workforce, and like this is something that is abnormal, is just not the case, right? Um, and I think what you'll point out is the men have dropped, but what happened is that overall the participation rate increased, and the reason why is because women started entering the workforce in the 1960s. Um, so there are more men who are not working, but household wise, or you know, that's more of a cultural issue than it is an economic issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Um, I I'm looking at one where the labor force, and this isn't necessarily prime age, but um, the labor force participation is like 62.3. So that's the um, that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, yeah.
This is just labor force in general.
If you have it, and you want to send it via messenger and whatnot, I can pull it up and we can look at it. That's completely fine.
Let's see, I'm trying to find like an actual graph.
Yeah, no, no, no worries. And the other thing with that too is we have the highest wages that we've had adjusted for inflation, um, that we've ever had, right? So with the increase of immigrants, we haven't had lower wages and we haven't had a drop in labor participation. Um, in fact, we've continued to grow our economy, right? And that is important to point out because if you look at our birth rates are dropping. In order to continue to grow our economy and grow our country, we need to supplement that with immigration, or else you're going to end up being in a situation like Japan, where birth rates have dropped, and they don't have anybody to work, and you're kind of in this stagflation situation.
Well, I think that as far as that goes, um, I think that we need to, this is a whole nother this is a whole nother debate, but I think that there needs to be more of a culture change for Americans. Um, yeah, I mean, the drastic fall off of the population from Gen Z to Gen Alpha is staggering. Uh, I seen somewhere where like Gen Z's like 60 something million, uh, and Gen Alpha is it's not. I think by the time Gen Alpha, by the time that year range is over with, it's only going to be like 45 million. And
Yeah,
I think that's just I think that's just people not having kids. And I don't think that I think that there should I think that me as a parent, I this is a totally different subject, but me as a parent, I feel like that's one of those things where um as a society, girls are taught to, get a job, you know, do what they're supposed to do, um, as far as trying to get a career and a job and not to worry about having a family. I think that, and then boys are scared to talk to women now, it feels like, uh, especially kids that are like 18, 19, 20 years old. It's almost like they don't know how to they don't know how to talk to anybody. Um, and there's a lot of other factors and stuff that you know, we can get into that at another date, because I'd love to come back on and do something similar to this, or talk about another topic. But yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that as well.
yeah,
But
I yeah, I have a lot of thoughts, and I the issue for me is that the solution, in my mind, has to come through scientific breakthrough, where you're making pregnancy, like the symptoms of pregnancy and the toll that it takes on a woman's body, you are mitigating that to a point where it's um, no longer a hindrance on their like day-to-day um, life, right?
Right.
Because what happens is when women are in the workplace, they don't want to get pregnant because they don't want to miss work. They don't want that to end up being something that they get passed over for a promotion. And also just, as societies get more educated, you typically see like the birth rate start to drop. And that's just because there are more fun things to do than to, have kids and be pregnant and do that, right? So if you can do that, you'll end up having more women who are fine with having more kids, right? And then yeah, with men not being able to talk to women, I actually think this is a thing that happens for both men and women. I think it's the phones. I think that
Yeah.
everybody is trapped into technology and they just don't really know how to interact with people um, you know, in the wild, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
So
Um, I sent the reason why I probably went dark there for a second. I sent the link for uh, that graph. It's from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. So I sent that to you through Messenger.
yeah, great. All right. So this was the civilian labor force participation rate. So let's look that up. Do you know what the civilian labor force participation rate is measuring offhand?
Um, I am just assuming that it's just um, American citizens that are uh, able-bodied and of age to work. So I think it measures. I think the age is. I think the starting age is uh, that I think that you're able to work in the United States. Of course, you have to have a work permit. I think it's 15 or 16.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that it's a pretty wide range.
Yeah, so it starts at 16, and then it just continues throughout, right? So it would make sense that we would have a lower civilian labor rate because we're having an aging population. Like we said, there's a lower birth rate that's happening, so there's going to be more old people who have aged out of working that are still going to be in this labor force than there are new people coming in. The other thing that it says here is that this does not include military or institutions like prisons, nursing homes, or government entities. So you're taking out like a large, workforce of, of the population as well. Um, Especially when you talk about like, you're not talking about police officers, you're not talking about firefighters, you're not talking about school people. Um, you're only talking about like the private sector, and you're talking about an aging population, right?
Right. I
It
think
wouldn't. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think that back to the whole Drew thing, uh, having his job as you know, working doing power washing and stuff is, most of the people that you know he would hire would probably be somebody who's not well educated. They're not well. Maybe they're in college. Maybe they are of college age, prime age men and women is the 25 to 54 year mark, but there are jobs that, you know, that Americans anywhere from the age of 18 to 25, uh, they are losing out on in the scenario that you gave, where, they could the young strapping young man could, well, he might want to help Drew power wash the Spartan burgers, and he's losing a job, or he's losing an opportunity because Drew wants to pay less money to an illegal immigrant. I don't see that. I see that as unfair for those individuals who are trying to start out, try to gain experience in the workforce. Uh, so that's kind of my take on that, as far as
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a valid concern. I think when you look at the younger population right now, I think that getting them to work hard labor jobs for, um, you know, a a lower wage, one that would be needed for Drew to still stay profitable, and run the business, while still trying to grow the business as well. I don't know if there's a lot of those people out there looking for a job, right? And that goes back to the cultural issues that we talked about, right? We do have quite severe cultural issues with Americans, young Americans who were born in this country, who don't want to work, or who feel like they need to be on their phone 24/7, or that they're entitled to a lot of these, amenities that you should, like, why am I not getting this if I'm going out there and I'm, busting my ass to do this, right? Um,
yeah,
with immigrants that come through, and again, I I do think that it would be smart for people to not hire illegal immigrants, right? But if we're going to amnesty the people here, still immigrants in general are going to work for a lower wage. They're going to be okay with not saying, hey, I need $20 an hour for this. They're going to say, I can do this for 10 because I'm going to work 14, 16 hours and I'm going to make my money anyways. And they just come from a culture where hard work is more celebrated, right? Where, um, you know, so that's actually one of the reasons why I want more immigration in the United States is I want this younger generation to look around and I want them to see that we have to have a culture that you have to work hard. You have to go out and bust your ass to get what you want, right? And there's not many other examples of someone who will do whatever it takes to be successful than immigrants who are fleeing a country, going into a new country where they know nobody, and they are going and they are, working themselves to the bone so that they can provide a better life for their family, right? That is the culture that I want raised in America. That's the culture that unfortunately we
well,
don't have right now, you know?
yeah, I agree to a couple of those things, but I think you're just at that point you're taking advantage of people who don't know any better. Um, and I I would feel, and maybe it's more because I don't want to call it my morals or anything, but I don't think that these people that are coming over, it's not that they're not hardworking or anything. It's it's just that there are Americans who were born here who do deserve those jobs, and if they are legal immigrants and they're here on work visas, and there is some sort of documentation, you can make the argument that, hey, I'm gonna hire these people, and if it makes you feel better to work them a at a lower wage, that would be on that particular individual. But there are so many there's so many young Americans who are, you know, it is a culture thing. I think we both agree on that. There are many young Americans who are, you know, those jobs just aren't available, and they do need to learn how to work hard, and um, they do need to have access to those jobs. And when they don't have access to it because, somebody who's working cheaper is taking that position, I mean, what are they to do? I mean,
Right. Well, so that,
what do they do?
but that that they're at that point they're just learning market forces, right? So I agree if you're going to pay people under the table and you're not going to pay legal wages, then yeah, that's where an issue arises. But if we're talking about, hey, there's a federal minimum wage of 7.15 or whatever it is, and you have an immigrant that is going to work for $10 an hour, and you have a native-born American who is like, nah, I'm not doing this unless if it's $15 or $18 an hour. That's just market forces there, right? You're paying a legal wage. And you're letting the market dictate, you know, what this should be, right? And that is also something that we need to like. If I don't think that Americans are being cut access to these jobs. I think that they don't want to do these jobs for what it will pay. I think that if you told them, hey, we're going to give you $30 an hour, they'll do the job, right? Give them $25 an hour, they'll do the job. Give them $15 an hour, and they're like, I don't know, right? Maybe I'll just drive Uber instead, right? That's more of a cultural issue than it is an economic issue. Again, if we're talking about Drew going out and saying, I'm going to pay someone $4 an hour, yeah, that is when you run into an issue, right? We do need to crack down on businesses that are paying people below minimum wage, um, because you're right, that isn't fair. That's not fair to Americans, right? Because Americans won't be able to one, Americans shouldn't pay work for under minimum wage. They shouldn't be expected to work for under minimum wage. And then two, uh, legally, you're just probably not going to see a lot of employers that are really going to offer it to them either. But if we're just talking about both are going to be paid legal wages, but one person is just going to do it for cheaper, that's just like that. That's just market forces at work. Like
Well, yeah, I mean, I get that. It's just I don't think that there are I don't think that I personally don't think that that's actually happening. I think that there's more businesses that's doing the former, what you were talking about, is paying illegals under minimum wage. Um, and you know, there's evidence for that. I don't have it in front of me right now, but you know, the notion that Americans don't want to do the jobs that illegal immigrants that I have to push back on that because I think that, just gathering in my notes, there's a thing that I recorded. It's, only out of the civilian occupations as out of the 474 civilian occupations defined by the Department of Commerce, only six are majority immigrants, legal or illegal. Uh, and that those six only they account for 1% of the U.S. workforce.
right.
So
Yeah, I'm
I
not saying that Americans don't want to do the job. I'm saying that young Americans have priced themselves out. They think that they are worth more than they are, right? And this isn't just for lower, like uneducated people who are just trying to find, their first job or just trying to find their. If you look at people who have graduated college, and they think that they should have more than an entry level job, that they should be a manager, or they should be making, more than a tenured person. This happens a lot, and that's more of a cultural thing of we've told all of these kids that they're so special, and they're the most special, and they're the most worthy, and which is great, because I look at my daughter and I tell her that, right, because
Yeah.
in my eyes she is. But when they get out in the workforce, they have to learn, you're competing with 200 million more people, right?
Oh yeah.
Who all think that as well. And sometimes you're going to price yourself out of jobs that you should be doing. And sometimes, hey, you may end up saying, I'm not going to do that job because it's not worth my time is worth more than that. And you end up finding a better job. That's great. But we should still allow people, again, I agree with you. We need to cut down on businesses that are paying people under the table. I think if you amnesty the illegal immigrants that are here, as long as they go through the proper channels of verification and background checks, then you can really like you can really go after businesses that are doing that, because there's more documentation of who these people are, and what they're paying into the system, right? Um, I think that is the step that you need to take, and then you create an more streamlined path to citizenship, or permanent residency, to get into America, so that people who do want to come in and work hard can come in, they can work hard, and they can really set that culture of, yeah, like in order in order for America to do great things, we have to work really hard to do great things. That's not just at the very bottom, but that's at the middle, that's in the upper middle, and that's at the top as well. We all have to be working very hard so that we can continue this this great experiment that America is. And I think that if you don't have enough people who have that mindset of, I am going to grind and I am going to figure this out and be successful no matter what happens, then you're not going to teach the other people who have fallen victim to I should be able to be on TikTok 10 hours a day, right? And still
Yeah.
get paid, right? Like
Yeah.
that's my whole thing. Interject some more competition into the playing field, and then you're going to get better results for everybody, right? It's just human nature, right? That's when competitiveness comes out, right? Of like, okay, like you're right. I can't sit back anymore. I have to go out and I have to be the best version of myself. And that's what I want for everybody. But I can't parent everybody's children, you
Yeah.
know? So
Sometimes you want to. Sometimes you
right,
want to.
right. Yeah,
Um, one more thing, and I'll have to be getting off here in the next few minutes, but
for sure.
as far as um, the jobs that are available uh, for the less educated, lower class Americans, you know, when I think of that, I'm thinking about construction work or um, you know, cleaning and maintenance, food, food, restaurants, stuff like that. Those
Hospitality,
are,
yeah.
yeah, those are jobs that I did when I was 16, 17 years old. And that's that's kind of like that's kind of like my whole issue the with illegal immigration, is because those are the jobs that most of them will be taking. Um, we can, the prime age, you know, we can we can debate that, but I don't think there's much to, you know, I, I, I don't think that there's much to really debate when it comes to those are the types of jobs that are being taken, and you know, the 16, 17, 18-year-old people who are just starting out, they're not getting that work experience. They're
For
not
sure.
learning what hard work is. And I feel like if we were to hire more Americans instead of illegal immigrants, and I want to preface illegal because I'm not talking about people who are here the legal way. Uh, if we were to try to hire more Americans that are that age from 18 to 25, so to speak, I do think that that will actually benefit the economy a lot more rather than just the them being able to spend money. They'll be able to contribute more in taxes. Uh, they'll be able to contribute just more to the state and the local governments and also to the federal government that way.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I agree. I think that we should do our best to limit illegal immigration as possible. I think that in order to do that, you have to secure your border and you have to set up a system in place that um, at, at least my thought process is if we want to continue to have the riches that immigration has given us for the last 250 years, right? You have to set up a system in place that allows people to come over in a streamlined way and in a way that makes sense, while also understanding who is coming over, right? That way, once they have documentation, like you said, they can pay more into the system. They can, they don't have to worry about being found, right? It's just it's a better life for them too, right? They have more security coming over here and building their ways. Um, and I think the concerns for the young people, when we're talking about hospitality and we're talking about construction and cleaning and whatnot, I understand. I do get that. Um, my my thing would harken back to I do think a lot of people are just pricing themselves out of I'm not going to work at McDonald's because McDonald's only pays this amount of money. I can make more money, I want to make more money streaming, or I want to make more money Ubering, or I want to make more money,
right. More
doing these things,
more
right?
power more power to them if they feel like they can make more money streaming or you know pairing up their car to Uber. I mean, I think Ubers should. This is a different subject. I think Uber should provide the car for them if they're going to do Uber. Um,
Right.
but yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, more power to them.
yeah, yeah, more power to them. But that's where I think it comes in. I think we've just had this imbalance of young adults thinking that they are worth more than the market really. Because when you started in your construction jobs, and if you would have told the boss or the foreman, hey, no, I need to do this for at least $18 an hour, he would have beat you over the head with a 2x4, right?
He probably, yeah, he would have, they would have laughed. They would have laughed and they'd just say, get your ass back to work. That's what they'd have said.
Right,
So, yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
or
so
showed you the door, either one.
right, yeah, so and I think it's as much of a cultural issue with young adults as it is an access issue. Um, but I think that America is smart enough to be able to solve both of these problems, right? And I think that the great thing is that you and I both agree that immigration is good for America. Not knowing who is coming into the country and not being able to vet them is not good for the country. So we need to be
Yeah,
able to figure that out. And if we can start with that as kind of our common agreements, then then we're just having a debate about policy rather than um, morality or safety or things like that. So it makes it a little bit easier of we can debate left and right of, what do we think is the most efficient way to reach the end goal, but at least we're
Right.
working towards the same end goal.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was gonna say. We were kind of wrapping up is that, you know, it is very relieving to talk to somebody who's not so far left that they're I know some people that I work with that like they're so far left that they're Mangione fans. Like they celebrate, you know, the killings of CEOs regardless of your position on that or not. It's wild sometimes. So it is refreshing to, you know, regardless of how we feel about certain uh, politicians or ideas and stuff, it is refreshing to be able to sit down and just kind of have a civil conversation rather than, you know, all the knives coming out just because we don't like certain people. And it's just
Definitely.
that that's kind of that's kind of the I think I think that's been the issue with America for a while. And uh, some people want to say it started with Obama. Some people want to say it started with Trump. I mean, it just, it, everything's just become so, I think people start idolizing uh, politicians and uh, having, and when they start idolizing politicians, that it's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think it has to come from the internet, and putting yourself into echo chambers. It's something that we can dive into.
oh yeah. Eh,
I know you got to get going and whatnot, so I don't want
oh
to
no, no, no.
keep you held up. But yeah, that's something that we could talk about as well. That I think would be a really good conversation.
Oh yeah.
Next time you want to do this, Drew won't be on family vacation, so we can have all
It's
of
all
us
good.
together. But yeah, no,
We'll have
thanks for reaching
for sure.
out. And this is the platform that we want to create, where we can have these conversations. And even if you did have a much more extreme, like if you came on here and said, I only want America to be white, we can still have a conversation. You know, it
Yeah.
it it would have been a different conversation, but we can still have a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to build.
Yeah, we'll have to not make it always politics either. I'm just as big of a Panthers fan as Drew is too, and I'm a
Yeah.
father of three, so I don't have any fatherly advice, but I'd love to get in on some conversations like that before. So,
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah, this is what we want to build. So, we'll continue to build that out, and yeah, have Panther conversations. However sad or hopefully happy they may end up this year.
yeah,
And then yeah, parenting conversations are probably the biggest one that we want to end up growing, because that's where the culture changes, is
yeah.
through us being able to
I a
parent
hundred,
correctly. Yeah.
I 100% agree with that.
Yep. All right, Dick. Thank you for reaching out and wanting to do this. If anybody else who listens to this wants to have conversations with us, reach out. Let's set it up. Again, this is a platform where open conversation and dialogue is not only wanted, but it's encouraged. So, please reach out. But other than that, Jake, again, thank you. I know you got things to do in the morning. But yeah, thank you.
No problem, man. I'll see you later.
All right, bye.